Take a stroll through a college town virtually anywhere in the United States, and you are almost guaranteed to encounter certain mainstays of higher education. Bookstores supplying tomes concerning virtually every subject, clothing and apparel stores proudly sporting the alma mater's insignia, and a more than healthy smattering of clubs and taverns, dry or otherwise. It was one of these modest, near ubiquitous establishments that would serve as the genesis for one of Morgantown, West Virginia's most enduring mysteries, the disappearance of Marsha Ferber. For much of the 1980s, Marsha Ferber's establishments, the Underground Railroad and the Dry House, were fixtures of Morgantown's youth and club scene. The club itself was eclectic, playing host to groups specializing in everything from acoustic folk to full-blown 80s punk. But to those who knew her, Marsha Ferber was more than just a businesswoman. She was an unapologetic humanitarian with a deep love for children and planet Earth. Hardly the type of person one would expect to find at the epicenter of a decades-old mystery. Sometime on April 25, 1988, 47-year-old Marsha Ferber disappeared without a trace. She has not been seen since. Today, nearly 35 years later, authorities and Marsha's friends still do not even know if she is alive or dead. Located in the heart of what is commonly referred to as mountaineer country, West Virginia University is the largest higher education institution in the state. Founded in 1867 with funds secured from the Morrill Act, it is only 4 years younger than its namesake. Morgantown, its city of residence, eventually found itself located on the English side of the Treaty of Paris in 1763. This line of demarcation, known as the Proclamation Line, prohibited English settlement to the west of a line running north-south from the northern tip of Florida to the Canadian border. Settled in 1772 by Zaquil Morgan, the city of Morgantown received a charter from the Virginia General Assembly in 1785. In 1863, it was included in the formation of the restored government of Virginia, or as we know it today, West Virginia. The establishment of West Virginia University just 4 years later all but assured that Morgantown would be a college town for the foreseeable future, a future which has since passed its sesquicentennial. Today, Morgantown is a bustling, moderately sized city. With a population of around 30,000, its economy is heavily tied to the yearly influx of students and faculty to West Virginia University, affectionately known by most as WVU. While it sports many of the industries and businesses common to any comparable-sized city, the influence of WVU and its student body are impossible to miss. Whenever classes are in, the foot traffic and nightlife of this once conservative-minded seat of academia liven up considerably. Morgantown and WVU are certainly not known as sleepy, slow-moving Appalachian fixtures. Given the near symbiotic relationship, it is no surprise that many, if not most, of the businesses lining the city's streets are heavily geared towards the student population. It should also come as no surprise that it is not uncommon for things to occasionally go off the rails. Rowdy gatherings and alcohol-fueled parties are just as prevalent in Morgantown as in any other college town. Over the years, many taverns, sports bars, and nightclubs have sprung up to host those seeking a night of revelry or just an escape from the world of academia. One such establishment set up house at 123 Pleasant Street in the summer of 1982. That fall, the club, known as the Underground Railroad, was purchased by 42-year-old Morgantown transplant Marsha Ferber. Ferber soon endeared herself to her clientele and became a fixture of Morgantown's nightlife. At the time, it is unlikely that anyone ever imagined that Marsha and her club would find themselves at the heart of a mystery that has now spanned over 34 years. Marsha simply did not seem the type to up and vanish without a trace. Yet, from all outward appearances, it appears she may have done just that. Marsha Ferber was born Marsha Bodine in Massachusetts on April 4th, 1941. For much of her early life, she lived what many would consider to have been the life of a conformist. She married, raised 2 children, and by most standards of the times was considered a typical housewife. By the late 1960s, however, Marsha's life plans had taken a decidedly progressive turn. She aligned herself with the anti-establishment movements of the day, in particular those advocating an end to the war in Vietnam and a return to an agrarian and communal society. In the early 1970s, Marsha moved to Calhoun County, West Virginia, where she joined a local commune. At the time, West Virginia was enjoying a renaissance of sorts, spurred on by the return of many former state residents, as well as an influx of outsiders seeking an escape from urban and suburban living. The grassroots movement, calling for a return to the land and a rejection of the concrete jungle and commercialism, was a good fit for the mountain state at the time, and many such communes, farms, and other co-op-based organizations began to appear. The 60s and 70s, however, did not last forever. While the progressive and open ideals never truly disappeared, they did find it necessary to change or at least bend with the times. When the commune in Calhoun County disbanded, Marsha moved to Morgantown, where she purchased the Earth House, a residential boarding house on College Avenue, catering mostly to local hippies and students. Marsha, along with her friend Deborah Lynn Hamilton, began production of The Loving Forkful, a publication serving food co-ops in the upper and lower Ohio Valley. Following the 1982 purchase of the Underground Railroad, Marsha's roots in Morgantown seemed firmly planted. For the next 5 years, the Underground Railroad chugged on, offering up not only food and spirits, but an eclectic mix of live music. Headliners between 1982 and 1988 included blues to rock legend Bo Diddley, punk sensation the Dead Kennedys, and hard rock's Red Hot Chili Peppers. It was not, however, all smooth sailing. Not unlike other college towns the world over, the heavy concentration of 20-something-year-olds invariably meant a heavy concentration of narcotics and other illicit substances. While partying, loud music, and booze may have been tolerated and even encouraged by the local community, the importation and sales of drugs, in particular harder drugs like cocaine, LSD, and speed, was less palatable. As the ideology of the surrounding region began a slow but steady shift to a less permissive mindset, the attitudes of many towards establishments like the Underground Railroad began to cool. It was no real secret around Morgantown that Marsha played the part of not only a seller, but also an importer of soft drugs, particularly marijuana. While the nature of such an enterprise naturally means that details are not openly spoke of or recorded in a ledger, it has been ascertained that Marsha's primary source for her product was New York City. This in sharp contrast to today, where the primary conduit runs to the upper Midwest. Despite the ever-present risks of such endeavors, Marsha was able to prosper. Whatever her vices, she had earned a solid local reputation as someone who cared about others, youths especially, and enjoyed giving back to the community. Indeed, some even came to regard Marsha's generosity and support as a kind of de facto community service. On the surface, all seemed to be well. The first indications that something may be amiss in Marsha's life began to appear in early 1988. Her friends and business cohorts noted that Marsha, who was known to have been very health-conscious concerning her diet, had started eating foods which she had previously shunned, foods that were less than farm fresh. They also noted that Marsha had begun smoking, another vice she had not only shunned, but openly discouraged. Karen Zellermeyer, a friend of Marsha's from her Calhoun County days, noted that Marsha did not seem to be going out as much, and she had grown uneasy over Marsha's recent associations with members of a biker club who had been frequenting the Underground Railroad. It was also during this time that Marsha's 5-year relationship with her boyfriend and business partner, Randy Williams, began to cool. There were indications that Marsha may simply have been growing weary of Morgantown. In early 1988, the Dry House, a non-alcoholic student-oriented establishment that Marsha had opened in 1986, was experiencing financial difficulties, and Marsha had been looking to have it made into a legitimate youth center connected to a non-profit organization. Marsha's attorney, Milton Zellermeyer, later confirmed that the Dry House project was something that Marsha had been working on for quite some time, and a meeting had been scheduled with a representative from Knoxville, Tennessee. Many of Marsha's friends and acquaintances later recalled that in the months leading up to her disappearance, she seemed to have been preoccupied with the idea of moving to Florida and opening up a lounge or hotel. However, the sudden onset of wanderlust seemed to have partially evaporated in mid-April, when Marsha expressed a strong desire to purchase and renovate the historic Metropolitan Theater on High Street, an undertaking which would likely have kept her in Morgantown for some time. During the weekend of April 15th and 16th, 1988, Marsha drove to New York City to visit with her old friend Karen Zellermeyer and her daughter. Marsha did not return to Morgantown until Thursday, April 20th. It was later learned that Marsha had also taken advantage of the trip to secure a very large amount of marijuana and return it to Morgantown with intent to sell. At around 10:30 p.m. on Saturday, April 22nd, Marsha's friend and rent-free tenant, Jack Herbert, asked Marsha if she would look after his booth at a local flea market the following day, as he was planning his own trip to New York. Marsha agreed. A short time later, she drove to nearby Pursglove and visited with another friend, Dana Dalton, at the home of Dana's boyfriend. Marsha later drove back to her apartment above the Dry House. At around 3:30 a.m., now Sunday, April 24th, Marsha chanced upon Randy Williams as he was leaving the Underground Railroad. According to Williams, there did not appear to be anything amiss. Later that day, Marsha kept her promise and manned the booth belonging to Jack Herbert at a nearby flea market. That afternoon, another of Marsha's longtime acquaintances, Gary Perkins, arrived in Morgantown from Cleveland on a scheduled visit. That evening, the two discussed some details concerning Marsha's possible relocation to Florida and some properties she was interested in. Perkins spent the night on the couch at Marsha's apartment above the dry house. The following day, Monday, April 25th, Marsha and Gary met up at the Underground Railroad. Marsha had advised several friends that she and Gary planned to drive to Pittsburgh and would be home sometime after 6 p.m. The office manager of the Underground Railroad, Michelle Wolford, later recalled that Marsha stated she was taking the rest of the afternoon off and that she and Gary would be going out to visit friends upon their return from Pittsburgh. Wolford stated that she last saw Marsha in the club's office. She was casually dressed in a long white man's shirt that had been hand-painted and a pair of blue or black jeans. She was carrying nothing but a simple day pack. According to Wolford, Marsha and Gary left in Gary's vehicle at approximately 1 to 1:30 p.m. It was the last time Marsha Ferber was seen or heard from by any of her friends or family. The exact details of just what transpired between the evening of Saturday, April 23rd, and the afternoon of Monday, April 25th, are still the subject of contention and conjecture. We will review the various names, places, and times in more detail later in this feature. Marsha's rent-free tenant, Jack Herbert, returned to Morgantown from New York on Tuesday, April 26th. At first, he was not alarmed to find that Marsha was not home, as it was not out of character for her to occasionally take a spur-of-the-moment excursion. However, when Thursday came with still no word from Marsha, Jack's worries began to mount. He contacted Michelle Wolford and learned that she had neither seen nor heard from Marsha since Monday. Calls to other friends and acquaintances also yielded negative results. As many in Marsha's circle were connected to varying degrees with drug use and sales, there was a natural hesitation to get in touch with local law enforcement. However, when Sunday arrived with still no sign or word from Marsha, her friends put their personal fears aside and reported her as a missing person. Jack Herbert made the initial missing persons report to Officer Kress with the Morgantown Police Department on Sunday, May 1st, 1988, 6 days after Marsha Ferber was last seen. Shown here, the original missing persons report, graciously made available to MysteriousWV by Morgantown Deputy Chief of Police Phil Scott, shows the first bits of crucial information imparted to authorities. 2 days later, the investigation began in earnest, with Detectives R.L. Boyce and J.R. Downs on point. While Downs and Boyce interviewed Michelle Wolford, Detectives Fleming and St. Clair began a detailed examination of Marsha's personal vehicle. Her car, a gold 1987 Toyota Tercel, was found parked at an active parking meter across from her apartment. The vehicle appeared to have been undisturbed, and the detectives noted no signs of foul play, attempted entry, or other useful evidence. During their initial interviews, Jack Herbert and Michelle Wolford advised that they had last seen Marsha on April 23rd and April 25th, respectively. Michelle Wolford's original statement, shown here, confirms that Marsha left the Underground Railroad with Gary Perkins on the afternoon of Monday, April 25th, though she felt the time was nearer to 1 or 1:30 p.m. Wolford added that Marsha was close friends with a woman by the name of Shauna Jennings, who lived in Marjorie Gardens, a public housing complex located about 2 miles south of the Underground Railroad. That same day, Detective Boyce spoke with Gary Perkins by phone. Perkins advised that he had come to Morgantown from Cleveland on Sunday, April 24th, to bring Marsha a list of possible business locations in Florida. During a subsequent interview, Perkins added that he and Marsha had first stopped at the Marjorie Gardens housing complex before driving on to the 4 Points Sheraton in Pittsburgh. Perkins went on to say that he dropped Marsha off at the Underground Railroad between 6:30 and 7 p.m. on Monday, April 25th, and then returned to Cleveland. A check of local hospitals, as well as taxi, bus, and limousine services in Pittsburgh, all proved fruitless. Rounding out a long day's work, Detective Boyce received a telephone call from Deborah Hamilton at around 10:40 p.m. Hamilton stated that she had received potentially crucial information from a woman named Barbara Mokas. Barbara reportedly had related to Hamilton that she had seen Marsha on Saturday, April 30th. According to Hamilton, she also stated that two other individuals reported to her that they had seen Marsha on Friday, April 29th, in the company of a man named Glenn Moore. Marsha and Glenn were said to have been riding in a gray Pontiac Trans Am in the Marjorie Gardens at the time. Detectives later spoke to Glenn Moore, who advised that Marsha had told him that she planned to be at the Pittsburgh airport at around 2 p.m. on Monday, April 25th. Following up on the numerous names which had surfaced, Detective Boyce contacted the Drug Task Force and learned that many of Marsha's friends and associates were the targets of investigations by local and federal agencies. It was ascertained that Barbara Mokas was, in fact, Barbara Beagle, another friend of Marsha's. During her interview on May 5th, Beagle stated that both she and her husband had seen Marsha at approximately 11:40 p.m. on Friday, April 29th, just after they left the Warner Theater on High Street. Beagle stated that she observed Marsha standing in front of the Army store on Pleasant Street. Barbara and the woman believed to have been Marsha briefly spoke to one another, at which time Marsha is reported to have stated that she was on her way to Maxwell's. Marty Jefferson, the woman whom Michelle Wolford had referenced, told Detective Boyce that she had not seen Marsha Ferber and Glenn Moore together in a gray Trans Am, but had seen Marsha in what she described as a big gold car with Pennsylvania plates around the time she disappeared. Detective Boyce was able to later confirm that Glenn Moore's girlfriend, Cheryl Helsley, did indeed own a gray 1981 Pontiac Trans Am, and that it was often driven by Moore. A follow-up with the West Virginia State Police revealed that Glenn Moore was known to have been a member of the Magnificent Souls Motorcycle Club and was known by the moniker of the Beast. The state police also advised that Moore was known or suspected to have been associated with other members of the same club who were heavily involved in the distribution of cocaine. By the middle of May 1988, authorities found themselves faced with a mishmash of names, dates, false leads, and potential motives, while at the same time being left in the dark as to whether or not Marsha Ferber was even alive or dead. Coordinated exposure by local television, radio, and newspaper outlets brought forth an influx of leads, though none of them panned out. Then, on May 23rd, yet another element was added to the already complex web of confusion. That day, Deborah Hamilton contacted Detective Boyce and advised that the balance for the checking account used by the Underground Railroad was $5,000 lower than their internal records indicated it should be. Hamilton advised that the checking account through the Citizens Saving and Loan was actually in the name of Randy Williams, Marsha's boyfriend and business associate, though most transactions were normally made by Marsha herself. Further checking revealed that the missing $5,000 had been transferred from the business account into a savings account on April 4th, 1988, a full 3 weeks before Marsha Ferber is believed to have gone missing. Detective Boyce obtained a subpoena for the records and learned that Randy Williams had used a countercheck to transfer the $5,000 from the checking account into a savings account held in his own name. Curiously, the records also indicated that $4,000 was subsequently withdrawn from Mr. Williams' savings account on April 27th, 2 days after Marsha is believed to have gone missing. Equally as puzzling, the records went on to show that $1,500 had been deposited back into the account utilized by the Underground Railroad on May 9th. Why the sudden and seemingly pointless shuffling of funds? Detectives decided it was time to have a talk with Randy Williams. Randy Williams provided detectives with a recorded statement on June 1st, 1988. Williams advised that his title with the Underground Railroad was Vice President of the corporation and that he personally owned 20 shares of its stock. He stated that his relationship with Marsha had begun to sour and that he had surreptitiously withdrew the $5,000 from the business account and later redeposited $1,500 to give him leverage in selling his portion of the corporation. The $1,500 had been replaced on May 9th to cover the monthly mortgage payment on the property. Williams admitted that the souring of his relationship with Marsha was at least somewhat due to his relationship with another woman. He did state that he had not spoken to or seen Marsha since around 3:30 a.m. on Sunday, April 24th, when the two briefly exchanged words outside of the Underground Railroad. He had no idea as to her present whereabouts. Williams went on to state that neither he nor Marsha owed the other any money, and that Marsha had recently expressed interest in possibly relocating her business ventures to the South. He also described Marsha as a, quote, very jealous woman, end quote. Randy Williams willingly submitted to a polygraph examination. Deborah Hamilton later declined to press charges against Williams for his misuse of business funds. On June 10, 1988, Gary Perkins was arrested by the Gouger County, Ohio Sheriff's Department on an outstanding warrant for receiving stolen property. Perkins retained legal counsel, thus delaying a sit-down interview until Friday, August 5th. Perkins confirmed that he and Marsha had first met in 1979 when he was an inmate at the Kennedy Center Federal Corrections Institution in Morgantown. Perkins then went on to restate much of what he had related in earlier conversations. Perkins did indicate, apparently for the first time, that it was his understanding that Marsha would be waiting for somebody at the 4 Points Sheraton in Pittsburgh. He confirmed that on the way back to Morgantown from Pittsburgh, he first stopped for gas along Beechhurst Avenue before dropping Marsha off at the Underground Railroad. By now, authorities had successfully covered each point of the so-called murder triangle, a Criminology 101 lesson which states that 80% of all homicides committed in the United States will align with at least one of three common denominators: drugs, money, or jealousy. The Morgantown Police Department now had at least enough information to justify pursuing any or all of them. However, there remained one wild card in the hopelessly overshuffled deck. Where was Marsha Ferber? Ratio speculations aside, the clues to the ultimate fate or whereabouts of Marsha Ferber seem to have been revealed in a scattershot manner at best. Authorities had at least a handful of definite and verifiable time and place combinations, as well as a healthy smattering of plausible or possible ones. Though the past 34 years have elevated Marsha's disappearance to a near cult-following level, the devil of her case, like nearly all others, is in the details. The W5H1. What, where, when, who, why, and how. In this instance, the time frame spans just over 48 hours, covers well over 150 miles, and boasts an eclectic dramatis personae, some of whom continue to remain off-stage. We will now reconstruct, in as much detail as possible, the known and suspected actions and interactions of Marsha Ferber from the evening of Saturday, April 23rd, to the evening of Monday, April 25th, 1988. Whenever possible, we have drawn from contemporary and first-hand accounts, either from the original case file compiled by the Morgantown Police Department or from local news and media outlets. Saturday, April 23rd, 1988. We don't know much about Marsha Ferber's actions during the first 3 quarters of the day. The exact time is not known, but at some point that day, Marsha spoke on the phone with her friend Deborah Hamilton. The length and nature of their conversation is also unknown. At around 10:30 p.m., Marsha met with her rent-free tenant, Jack Herbert. Herbert advised Marsha that he was going to New York City the following day and asked her if she would mind watching over his booth at a local flea market. Marsha readily agreed. Sometime thereafter, Marsha drove to the unincorporated community of Perkins, roughly 4.5 miles northwest of Morgantown. Here, she visited with Dana Dalton at the residence of her boyfriend. Dalton later reported that Marsha had simply wanted to get out of Morgantown for a while. Sunday, April 24th, 1988. Marsha remained with Dana Dalton into the wee hours of the morning before returning to the Underground Railroad and her second-floor apartment. According to Marsha's boyfriend, Randy Williams, he and Marsha briefly exchanged words as she was entering the building. The time was approximately 3:30 a.m. Williams reported that nothing seemed at all out of the ordinary. By all accounts, Marsha filled in for Jack Herbert at his booth in the nearby flea market later that day. Sometime prior to Sunday evening, Gary Perkins contacted Marsha Ferber by phone and confirmed that he would be driving to Morgantown from Cleveland, a drive which would normally take about 3.5 hours. Perkins stated that when he arrived in Morgantown, he went directly to the Underground Railroad and Marsha's apartment above the dry house. According to Perkins, the two talked about Marsha's ideas concerning a move to Florida, as well as her new thoughts about possibly purchasing the Metropolitan Theater in Morgantown. It should be noted here that Perkins' statement at this point is somewhat jumbled and does not make clear whether or not he and Marsha left the apartment to visit the theater or just went downstairs to the Underground Railroad. Perkins stated that he spent Sunday night at Marsha's apartment and slept on her couch. Monday, April 25th, 1988. Gary Perkins stated that he got up that morning and had breakfast at the Blue Ribbon restaurant next to the Underground Railroad. Perkins next joined Marsha in her office inside. He stated that some other people were present. Michelle Wolford, the general manager of the Underground Railroad, stated that she was with Marsha in the office that morning and confirmed that Gary Perkins was also present. According to Michelle, Marsha stated that she was taking the afternoon off, would return to Morgantown at about 6 p.m., and would then go to visit with friends. Michelle Wolford recalled that Marsha and Gary left the Underground Railroad between 1 and 1:30 p.m. Gary Perkins placed the time at nearer to noon or shortly thereafter. According to Gary Perkins, the pair next drove south to Marjorie Gardens, a distance of just over 2 miles, which should have taken no more than 5 to 10 minutes. Just why the pair drove to Marjorie Gardens or who they were there to meet is not known. It should also be noted that Shauna Jennings, named by Michelle Wolford and Donna Dalton as a close friend of Marsha's, was a resident of Marjorie Gardens. However, on May 20th, 1988, Detective Boyce called at 1212 Marjorie Gardens to interview a woman by the name of Becky Payne. Payne was not at home, though Boyce had noted in his loose papers that Payne may have been the person that Marsha went to see on April 25th. We do not know just when Gary Perkins and Marsha Ferber left Morgantown. According to Perkins, their ultimate destination was the 4 Points Sheraton Hotel, located at 910 Sheraton Drive in the Pittsburgh suburb of Mars. Under ideal driving conditions, this drive would have taken right at 90 minutes. The manager of the Sheraton, Art Santomo, reported that a couple matching the general description of Gary and Marsha had a late lunch or an early dinner at the hotel's restaurant on April 25th. A receipt from the table showed that one person ordered a New York strip and another ordered a chicken parmesan. A bottle or glasses of wine were also ordered, bringing the total bill to $75.01. Waiter James Terwilliger later advised that he served the couple in question on April 25th. He noted that Gary Perkins appeared to be spaced out and Marsha appeared tired. Of particular importance, Terwilliger recalled that the couple remained at the restaurant from 3:27 until 4:58 p.m. Gary Perkins would later state that he and Marsha then drove back to Morgantown. Perkins stated that he gassed up his car at a service station on Beechhurst Avenue and then dropped Marsha off at 123 Pleasant Street at 6:30 p.m. or perhaps as late as 7 p.m. And it is here that a question of both time and memory enter the narrative. The 4 Points Sheraton, now the Doubletree by Hilton, is located here, just off of exit 76 and 77 of Interstate 79. Interstate 79 does directly link the hotel with Morgantown. In the contemporary reports, the hotel is alternately listed as being located in Mars or Warrendale, Pennsylvania. As previously stated, this trip, under ideal conditions, can be made in as little as 90 minutes. If conditions were ideal, then Gary Perkins could have made the trek back to Morgantown, fueled his car, and then dropped Marsha off at the Underground Railroad at around 6:30 p.m. This scenario also assumes that the speed limits are maintained at all times. April 25, 1988 was a Monday. If the account of waiter James Terwilliger is accurate, then Gary and Marsha left the hotel's restaurant at 4:58 p.m., right at the start of rush hour traffic. Allowing Perkins' statement a liberal interpretation and assuming an arrival nearer to 7 p.m., is it possible to make the trek in 90 to 120 minutes with a departure time of 5 p.m. on a weekday? We decided to try it for ourselves, adjusting our travel within West Virginia and Pennsylvania to the 1988 speed limit of 65 as opposed to 70. We also allowed Perkins the benefit of the doubt and added only 5 minutes to stop and refuel on Beechhurst Avenue. Granted, we did not make the trek on a Monday afternoon in the month of April and did not allow for any possible delays attributable to weather, construction, or vehicular accidents. We departed the parking lot of the Sheraton Hotel in Pittsburgh right at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, September 28, 2022. we arrived back at 123 Pleasant Street in Morgantown at 6:44 p.m. Adding 5 minutes to account for refueling, the total elapsed time was 1 hour and 49 minutes. So, the drive can be made in under 2 hours. However, in 1988, authorities noted in the official report that they had no independent witnesses to corroborate the claim that Marsha arrived back in Morgantown on the evening of April 25th. This, effectively, returns the matter to square one. The last corroborated sighting of Marsha Ferber was at the Sheraton Hotel's restaurant in Pittsburgh at approximately 4:58 p.m. on Monday, April 25, 1988. Discounting unconfirmed sightings over the next week, she has not been seen since. In 1989, the Underground Railroad property was sold. Some of its original furnishings were salvaged and retained for posterity. Recently, in June of 2022, Jamie Zellermeyer, the daughter of Marsha's longtime friend Karen, brought Marsha's disappearance back to the forefront with an extensive 8-part podcast entitled I Was Never There. Approaching the matter on a primarily personable level, Jamie and her mother reached out to many who were close to Marsha during her lifetime, exploring not only her disappearance, but just who she was as a person. Many persons who had not spoken out on the matter since 1988 faced the microphone and recounted what they remembered of Marsha, the good, the bad, and the in-between. It should be noted that neither Marsha's surviving family nor Gary Perkins opted to participate in the production. The engaging series put forward many theories and opinions about what might have happened in 1988, but the ultimate conclusion was a virtual mirror of the investigation itself. A collection of facts, conjecture, and postulations, but no definitive conclusion. Perhaps episode 1 of I Was Never There summed up the matter about as succinctly as possible. What the hell happened to Marsha Ferber? While we still have no definitive answer to that lingering question, the recent focus on Marsha's disappearance has rekindled some previous theories concerning her case. Was Marsha's disappearance a result of her involvement with narcotics? Or did she simply choose to leave her current life behind and start over on a sunny beach or under a palm tree? These questions will probably never be answered until Marsha's ultimate fate is ascertained. If she is alive, then she can address the matter herself. If she is not, then determining the time and cause of her death takes on added importance. As always, please pay close attention to the following summation. When she disappeared in April of 1988, Marsha Carol Ferber was 47 years of age. Today, she would be 81 years of age. At the time of her disappearance, Marsha stood 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighed approximately 145 pounds. She had graying hair, green eyes, and occasionally wore glasses. When last seen, she was wearing a long white men's shirt which had been hand-painted red, yellow, and blue. She was wearing either blue or black jeans and was carrying what was described as a day pack. Marsha's purse and vehicle were later found undisturbed. Her car, a 1987 Toyota Tercel, was parked on the upper level of a parking garage at the corner of Chestnut and Pleasant Streets in Morgantown, West Virginia. Marsha was last seen in the company of Gary Perkins in the restaurant of what was the 4 Points Sheraton Hotel in Pittsburgh. A waiter at the restaurant later recalled that Marsha appeared tired. Marsha and Gary Perkins were reported to have been at the restaurant between 3:27 and 4:58 p.m. on Monday, April 25, 1988. Gary Perkins later advised that he drove Marsha back to Morgantown and dropped her off at the Underground Railroad between 6:30 and 7 p.m., although authorities were unable to independently verify that Marsha had indeed returned to Morgantown. Prior to her disappearance, Marsha had expressed interest in leaving Morgantown and relocating to a location in the South, perhaps a coastal area in Florida. Marsha had conducted preliminary research on properties in the Florida area, but had also expressed an interest in purchasing and refurbishing the Metropolitan Theater in Morgantown. Marsha was born in New Jersey in 1941. She has ties to both the Baltimore and New York City area. Authorities later ascertained that Marsha made semi-regular trips to New York City for the purpose of transporting narcotics back to Morgantown. It is not known if Marsha's disappearance was in any way related to her legal or illicit business activities. If you have any information concerning the disappearance of Marsha Ferber, please contact Deputy Chief Phil Scott with the Morgantown, West Virginia Police Department at 304-284-7454.